And so for the same reasons underlying his decision on executive privilege, Trump has determined that he will not assert immunity to preclude you from testifying before them either. I had no experience in the White House that would provide any reason to question his command as president. He was in charge.
The possibility is there that there were deep state bureaucrats in the White House that were just using that Autopen to sign major legislation and major executive orders that Joe Biden had no knowledge of and never would have supported if you look at his previous 3 decades of public service.
Oh, how the tables have turned. You remember how Joe Biden, as soon as he stole the election and took the White House, how he said that he was going to basically eliminate all of the protections that the prior Trump administration had. One of those protections, of course, is called executive privilege. Trump came in again, and now he has the same power that Joe Biden used against him. There was this old, gentlemanly agreement between the presidents. You come in, you protect the executive privilege of the one going out. It's your office now, but you don't violate the confidences of the guy who is there behind you, right? Unless you're Joe Biden, you come in here and you're being governed by Democrats and you have no idea what the heck's going on. Then they waived executive privilege, which means that certain people had to come and testify, like Steve Bannon. If he didn't show up and testify or whatever, then he could be prosecuted under Peter Navarro, right? Then they could be prosecuted. And that none of this privilege actually was extended now that Joe Biden was in charge. Well, now Joe Biden is gone. And now we've got questions about his administration. And now the White House just sent a letter back to Biden's aide, the old reversal. Her name, of course, is Neera Tanden. She's going to appear, was today, before the House Oversight Committee to get asked questions about Biden's broken brain. The letter argues that asserting executive privilege is not justified because of the allegations. Says the president authorizes you, waives you to provide unrestricted testimony irrespective of potential privilege, right? The White House is waiving it, so you don't have it anymore, Neera. Here's the letter they sent to her. They said, all right, Miss Tanden, the Honorable, says, I write regarding a request for testimony issued to you by the House of Representatives, James Comer, saying, in light of unique and extraordinary nature of the matters under investigation, President Trump has determined that an assertion of executive privilege is not in the national interest, and so we don't need it. And therefore, it's not justified with respect to the particular subjects within the purview of the Oversight Committee. Now, these subjects include your assessment of Biden's mental fitness for the office of the president and your knowledge of who exercised executive powers during his administration. The extraordinary events in this matter constitute exceptional circumstances warranting an accommodation to Congress. So smartly drafted, right? Trump is not saying, yeah, we do send everybody over there to talk about anything. Like, we're very protective of our executive privilege. But Biden's broken brain is so exceptional that we are going to make an exception in this case. Evidence that aides to former President Biden concealed information about his fitness to exercise powers and that he may have unconstitutionally exercised those powers themselves to aid in their concealment. It implicates both Congress's constitutional and legislative powers. The Constitution of the United States also empowers Congress with the ability to remove the president under the 25th Amendment when the vice president and the cabinet attempt to remove a president who's unable to perform the duties of the office. Now, Neera, as was explained in the letter that we sent to you before requesting your testimony, Congress, in the letter that they sent to you, right, this is coming from the White House, Congress may consider a legislative response to the information you provide. And so we've thought about it. And after balancing their interests and our interests, as is required under the accommodation process, it is the president's view that this presents an exceptional situation, and Congress's need for the information outweighs the executive branch's interest in confidentiality, especially given the Trump administration and the executive branch's own interest in determining the validity of prior executive actions. That is huge, right? What was lawful? What is the chain of custody for all of those pardons that came down for Liz Cheney and Adam Shifty Pencilneck on the J6 committee? Why did Fauci need that pardon? And was it valid? Was Hunter Biden's pardon valid, or did he auto-pen it to himself on the way out? If you can show that those documents, I think, were out of order and that there's good evidence that Biden didn't know what the heck he was doing or didn't sign those himself or didn't go through the appropriate approval approval process might be an argument there. And our position on it has long been just charge them. You just charge them anyways. Make them file a motion to dismiss. So some fanny somewhere can just, on our side, can just go charge Hunter for a crime and make him come in there and then put forward his pardon as something that immunizes him against the prosecution for that and say, no, we don't think that it was actually lawfully valid and handed down from the president. And so now we're going to challenge it. But they continue. The president reached this view consistent with the practice established under the Biden administration, actually, because they did it to Trump. Trump has decided that it would not be appropriate to assert executive privilege with respect to communications with former President Biden and his advisors and staff on matters related to the scope of the interview. They're also citing this case from 1977. Now, therefore, from Gary, Deputy Counsel to President Trump, given these extraordinary circumstances, including Trump's determination on executive privilege and having reviewed the scope of the interview that's about to happen, the President, Nira, authorizes you to provide unrestricted testimony to the House Oversight Committee, irrespective of any potential privilege. They sat down today. We'll see what she said. This accommodation is unique to the facts and circumstances of this matter and to their interest. And so for the same reasons underlying his decision on executive privilege, Trump has determined that he will not assert immunity to preclude you from testifying before them either. So you are required to go in there. And they did that same thing to Trump people when they stole it from him. In light of Trump's determination not to assert executive privilege, we are not requesting that agency counsel be permitted to attend the deposition. Should you have any questions, let me know. Sincerely, Gary Lakowski. So you no longer have the protection of the White House. You covered up for a guy. You thought that your cover-up would enable him to remain in power and you'd still have your protections in the aftermath, but that has not happened. And so that was the letter sent out. We also are seeing that she prepared her statements for her opening depo today. This came out from Nira, and here is what she said to James Comer today. She says, all right, I am Nira Tandon, and I am here in response to Comer. He sent a letter saying that I participate in this transcribed interview. Hopefully we get the transcripts. As the committee staff knows, my counsel and I have been willing to voluntarily cooperate with this committee. I'm here to answer questions about my service in the Biden admin. Now, my cooperation should not be taken to mean that I think that this investigation is worthy of oversight. I don't believe it is. Indeed, millions of Americans wonder why this committee has conducted no oversight of the current administration on topics far more worthy of this, including the Qatari jet, Trump's meme coin, lawless attacks on universities and crap law firms, and excesses of ICE officers who are removing illegals from our country, because Nira loves the gangbangers. In this country, at this time, we need real oversight. So let me discuss my service, which is what we're asking about. Thank you for your little screed there, Nira. Says, in May 21, Biden named me as senior advisor with a portfolio on a bunch of issues, and I was named staff secretary and senior advisor in 21. Got a promotion quickly. As staff secretary, I was responsible for handling the flow of documents to and from the president. I was also authorized to direct that Autopen signatures be affixed to certain categories of documents. Sure. We had a system for authorizing the use of the Autopen that I inherited from prior administrations. So is she blaming Trump? We employed a system throughout my tenure as staff secretary. So in May 23, I was named head of the president's domestic council. From that point forward, I no longer served. I was no longer responsible for the overall flow of documents and no longer had any responsibilities in connection with the use of the Autopen. So she's cut off there. As head of the domestic policy council, I did have periodic discussions with Biden on a range of issues. And I would note that much of the public discussion on the subject matter of this hearing has been conflated. Two very different issues. First, the president's age, and second, whether Biden was in command. She writes, I had no experience in the White House that would provide any reason to question his command as president. He was in charge. And I'm here. I'm prepared to answer your questions, says Nira. Here's what James Comer said about it when he was getting prepped up on this hearing that's going to be taking place today in Comer's conference room.
There are sources that say that she had a big impact on making decisions as to which documents would be placed into the Autopen. What we've identified first are the 4 employees that we believe manually put documents into the Autopen, pressed the power button, and signed Joe Biden's name on them. Next batch of people that we're going to bring in are people like Ron Klain, and we'll get to the names that the president has mentioned as well. Everyone that we've sent notice to that we expect them to testify has agreed to testify thus far, except the doctor, and I've subpoenaed him. You can come in voluntarily, and things work out a whole lot better than if you have to come in via subpoena. So I think this investigation is progressing, and all the concerns that President Trump raised will be addressed in these transcribed interviews and depositions.
I mean, I've got the letter from 2024 from Dr. O'Connor pertaining to Joe Biden's health, and there's absolutely no mention of any cognitive decline, and there's no mention of any prostate cancer, which, of course, the Bidens was released and told the public after the Robert Hur tapes were released, which was obviously a tape showing Biden's cognitive decline. I want to get your take on that and what you make of that, and also this new information that we've got that there were 3 different Autopens, Autopen A, B, and C.
Yeah, that's accurate. You know, there's more information that's coming out daily. Luckily, we have a lot of former employees like Jean-Pierre who are coming out with books and interviews that are kind of painting a picture that Joe Biden really didn't know what was going on in his White House. This is important to our investigation because there were a lot of executive orders that were signed using the Autopen. There's really no excuse to use the Autopen on days when you're in the White House. Many of the documents that were signed with the Autopen were days that Joe Biden was actually in the White House. It's hard to explain that with respect to the doctor. If you'll remember, Joe Biden did an interview several years ago and said he had cancer. The White House quickly issued a statement saying, oh, he misspoke. Now, how many people do you know in the history of the world that have misspoke saying that?
Yeah, and that was that oil slick. The windshields were covered in oil. That's why I and so many other people like me have cancer, when he was out there on that speech sitting in front of the Potomac or something.
They had cancer when they really didn't. So, you know, there's evidence out there that would suggest that there's been a cover-up with respect to his cancer for many years, just based on Joe Biden's own words. So we've got a lot of evidence. There's more and more sources that are coming forward. You know, the key to a good congressional investigation, Maria, is having whistleblowers. I don't know if you would classify Jean-Pierre and people like Buttigieg as whistleblowers, but they're issuing statements and doing interviews that are very incriminating to Joe Biden's doctor and raise a lot of questions as to who was authorizing the use of that Autopen.
Well, I mean, Mr. Chairman, for 4 years, we all questioned some of these policies coming out of the White House that were so clearly anti-American. For example, leaving a wide open border and an unvetted border rather than actually understanding and knowing who's coming into the country. Millions of gotaways, 350 people encountered on the terrorist watch list, $7 trillion in spending leading to 40-year high inflation. Do you believe that there was a group of people who were actually pushing these anti-American policies and Joe Biden was unaware of it?
I believe it's very possible. If you look at Joe Biden's career, when he was on the Senate floor, he gave speeches, you know, encouraging a border, tight border. He encouraged, you know, a process to get immigration. But when he became president, just out of the blue, the Autopen started signing executive orders that would allow an open border. And you have liberals in the Democrat Party that have risen the ranks through the bureaucracies here in Washington, D.C., that believe that we need to fundamentally change the appearance of America, that America's too white, that we need more immigrants to come in. We need more end up being registered Democrats. That's a fact. So the possibility is there that there were deep state bureaucrats in the White House that were just using that Autopen to sign major legislation and major executive orders that Joe Biden had no knowledge of and never would have supported if you look at his previous 3 decades of public service.
No, that's just incredible. I mean, just to be clear.
It is incredible, no doubt about it. So James Comer's out there saying beginning today, White House officials will appear for these interviews. And so there's going to be a lot more to come. Hopefully Karine Jean-Pierre is on the list and we'll keep our eye on what comes out of that. But hopefully we get some transcripts at least. We can read what these people say as part of their cover-up. They've got a lot of protection if they stick together, right? So you need to start seeing cracks in the facade. People like Karine writing books and Tapper slowly starting to unveil the truth is going to be welcomed in the coming years. So hopefully we get some good details from some of these interviews and Comer stays on it. We'll keep our eye on it as well. Thank you for subscribing and joining as we do.